It's rear projected. Cool. Wow. So I could get up on the stage.
All right, can I have your attention, please? Welcome. Short comment. Your committee is considering moving this Friday coffee to a Thursday to accommodate people who like to go out of town on Friday. No decision, just thinking about it. If you have a valid objection, Fred, Al, let me know about it. Otherwise, we may take a look at it. Moving to a Thursday. Okay, today, how many of you knew that Abraham Lincoln actually spent several days in Richmond in April 1865 and in fact sat at the desk of Jefferson Davis? Anybody not know that? Okay, Charlie knew it. We are very fortunate today to have with us another VMI graduate, Mike Norman.
Hey, take over.
Who is the creator of the Civil War in Richmond Digital Library. If any of you saw the Spielberg movie on Lincoln, he was a historical advisor to that movie. He also was an advisor to the movie Free State of Jones. He has published in the Virginia Magazine of History the story of Richmond during the war. That 4 years, of course, was when it was the capital of the Confederacy. So we're proud to have with us today Mike Gorman, who also has published about the city of Richmond in the war in the Virginia Magazine of History and Biography, and is currently working on a book about photography in Richmond during the war years and during the 19th century. So, I'm proud to present Mike Gorman.
Thank you, Dan. That makes me sound a lot cooler than I am. First things first, y'all are in the back. I know it's like church. You want to fill in from the back, but I'm going to tell you, the best seats are right up here. You're going to love this. But if y'all want to move, I totally get it. If you don't, awesome. First things first, how many of you have been to one of my talks before where I show some of these photographs? That's what I wanted to see. For those of you that have come before, you're going to see some new things. For those of you that haven't, this is going to be really cool. And I've been sort of mulling over what I wanted to talk to you about. And, you know, so much of what a historian does is kind of married to a narrative that you create, and it kind of gets fixed, and it grows a little bit as you find more and more stuff. I'm here to tell you the last 15 years or so, being an historian has almost completely flipped what all of us thought we knew before, because of the sudden availability of primary sources, maps, photographs, you name it. It has just been pouring in from places like the National Archives, from places like the Library of Congress, and other places that have been digitizing, or other people have been digitizing. By the way, if you go on Family Search, for instance, the Mormons have been at this like crazy, and wow, they have turned up some incredible stuff. It's all out there, and it's really been kind of rejiggering how we look at things. So that's why I call this program New Frontiers in Digital History, because so much has been found and so much is new. So I'm going to use this as an excuse to kind of show off some of the photographs and visual material that we've found over the past 15 years. And yeah, I kind of used the royal we here. I did. But I really want to help you sort of see this is not something that you have to have special powers for. This is not something that I am so smart and I found the things. Anybody could do this, okay? So if just one of you tonight goes and starts playing on the Library of Congress site and emails me later and be like, have you seen this? And I go, no, then I've done my job. And I really would love to have that happen. So I'm here today on behalf of the Richmond National Battlefield Park, and I really want to thank you for having me. But this is my show, and I do stress sometimes things get a little weird, okay? We're just going to walk into that. I can't control what's in the photographs. Some things are not necessarily PG. And so I was kind of covering myself by saying this right away. We are in a PG-13 show, okay? I'm not going to go in a cussing fit, but, you know, things happen. The first thing I wanted to address is one of my favorite discoveries of the past year, which is what we call the Mickler map. And if nobody, this is Civil War jargon, and it doesn't really matter, but Nathaniel Mickler was the topographical engineer for the Army of the Potomac. And when the war ended, when the Civil War ended, he was tasked with going and creating this gigantic map of the theater of war in Virginia. So basically all the way from the wilderness down through Richmond and west to Appomattox. So if you put it all together, it would resemble a giant backwards L. Until recently, nobody had the ability to see all that. And then out of the frickin' blue, last year, the National Archives digitized them. Yeah. And I'll just give you an example of what this looks like. This is one of the map sheets of the Mickler map for Richmond. And you can see, of course, they put the dividing line right in the middle of the city. So, you know, you're kind of stuck there. But to give you an idea about the size we're talking about, that plat of paper is 4.42 feet wide and 2.5 feet tall. So imagine that thing actually printed out and placed on the ground. Okay, and of course it's got a partner which goes on the bottom, which of course they digitized too. And I put them together here for you. Yeah, that's Richmond in 1865. And believe me, we can zoom in. This is pulled out so you can see it. But of course, if you're like me, you're like, they digitized everything. Why would I not do it? So yeah, I stitched them together in Photoshop. You want to see it? Yeah, come on. Of course you do. This is the Mickler map of the Richmond area. So you can see the Chickahominy up there at the top right there. Here's Richmond. Of course, here's the east side of Richmond where the Seven Pines battlefield is. There's Drury's Bluff, south of Richmond. There's Fort Harrison, right outside of Richmond. We're coming down. We're going to go south to Petersburg, which I stopped for because, frankly, making this map had melted my computer. I could have gone on, okay? That gives you an idea of what's suddenly available. And to show you what I'm talking about, I blew up the Richmond section and tilted it so that, you know, we can all sort of see what we're talking about here. The incredible detail here, you know, there's Chimborazo over here to the east. Look at all the battery defenses, the big forts around Richmond. You can see them all. Look at the James River and Belle Isle. There's the prison camp right there on Belle Isle. You can see the Tredegar Iron Works right down there on the river. It's just amazing. I call this the chicken coop map because you can actually see the little structures indicated that when you look at them in a photograph, it's a chicken coop. But they mapped it. Who's ever gonna care about that chicken coop? Well, the topographical engineers did, and they show it on their map. And it's just that kind of detail that is astonishing. What that enables me to do is to blow it up and start plotting things on it. So what this is all the photographic locations, where the photographs were taken in Richmond in 1865 by the various firms. So when you see the green, that's Gardner's crew. Get it? Green, Gardner. And the red is the Anthony's or Brady and Company. So Matthew Brady's crew and T.C. Roche are shown there in the red. And there are three more that I didn't map because the map would get very cluttered. So these are basically the big three that are shown on there. And that's what we're going to play with today. So how did this all start for me? It really started, has anybody played with, it's about 6 volumes, it's beautiful bound books called The Image of War. And they were put out in the 80s by Jack Davis and some other colleagues of his. If anybody's not seen this, basically they attempted to find all the images of the Civil War and put them in books, publish them. And they were incredible. They actually are incredible. But they're very high res for their time. And this one was published in there, and it said Hollywood Cemetery. Anybody been to Hollywood Cemetery? Does that look like Hollywood to you? It doesn't to me either. But because in this book, it was printed so clearly, I could actually read the name on that headboard. And it said George W. Doss, 11th Alabama Volunteers. Great! Okay, now I can find him in Hollywood, and we'll go right to the spot, and we can do a, then and now kind of matchup kind of situation. Turns out I couldn't find him in Hollywood. And just because, I was trying to be thorough, I looked at the Chaco Cemetery roster. He's not in there. And I looked in the Oakwood Cemetery roster, and boom! there he was. It's in Oakwood Cemetery. So understanding that helped me, and again, this is in the late 90s, so I started to understand that just because something is captioned that way and repeated over and over, that's Hollywood Cemetery. And believe me, folks, to this day, even though I got it changed in the Library of Congress catalog description that it's actually Oakwood Cemetery, people still publish it and say that it's Hollywood. It's like we're just using these as props, not as documents. That's a problem. It actually shows something. It actually shows a guy's grave who we can go and find out about. Turns out he was mortally wounded at the Battle of Glendale, right outside of Richmond. He never was admitted to a hospital. He must have died on the way. And so he was buried right there in Oakwood Cemetery. And you can go visit his grave today very, very easily. But nobody had ever done that legwork. And so when I realized that, I was like, well, what else hasn't been discovered? And we're off. So that's what we're really going to do today, is talk about these photographs and what they show. Not just as props, not just as illustrative things that you might find in a book, but documents themselves. And so to give you an idea about this is how you would have seen these photos in 1865. Has anybody ever played with these? They're called stereo views, and I collect them. I love them. They are in 3D. These photos were taken in a pair so that you can mount them on a card and view them in 3D. I have another show that I do where we actually do that, where we put on the 3D glasses, and you guys look ridiculous, and we view these in 3D. But I'm not going to do that today. I don't have any more glasses. But to give you an idea about when I say small, one of these is 3 inches, okay? 3 inches. Well, the Library of Congress in the mid-aughts digitized all of these negatives, which they have both pairs for. So what that allows us to do is blow them up like that. And you can go even further. This is Castle Thunder in downtown Richmond. So what we're looking at here, this is Carey Street, right here. This is 19th Street, right here. Okay. For a long time, there used to be a Philip Morris building there. It's now an apartment complex has been built there. But this was basically the Guantanamo Bay, the Camp X-ray of the Confederacy. So if you were a naughty Confederate, you'd mouth off to your officer or something like that, you got slapped in Castle Thunder. If you were a spy, you got slapped in Castle Thunder. If you were considered disloyal or, or anything that made you suspect with the Confederate government. Remember, martial law is on, so that was a pretty broad definition. You got slapped in Castle Thunder. So this was a place of fear and symbolic oppression. So it got photographed a lot. But of course, what I love about it is that you can see people staring through from the past, thanks to the Library of Congress's incredible digitization. And I love as you look at these guys, they're doing their poses, right? But look at the kids over here. They seem more random. They seem like they just kind of jumped in and photobombed, right? Look at the various ages. And think about these kids, right? Their entire young lives has been war, right? They're caught up in this whole thing. And now, you can see that their buddies are, they're just hanging out, doing what kids do. But when you blow up these guys, look at each individual, right? A lot of them are doing, the Napoleon, right? This guy, with the hat, there's something very important over there I got to look at. They're posing. They know I'm doing this for posterity. But what I love is the dog. Look at the dog. Now, when we're talking about Civil War photography, it was you expose the plate. It could take 3 seconds, okay, 4 seconds. Anything that moves is going to blur. So when you see that blur, I love it. It means life. It means motion, right? So everybody says, oh, these things are just dead images. Nonsense. They're alive. Look at these guys. Just look. And you're going to see plenty of opportunities where we can do that again today. So we'll run over to the Tredegar Ironworks, where we used to have a visitor center, but now you can go down there, and the American Civil War Museum is there. This is a view from a trestle that no longer exists. It was the Richmond and Petersburg Railroad trestle. And that's what this is, by the way, is this. This used to be a gate Okay, you can sort of see, look, there used to be a gate here, and it's burned out. It's completely burned out. But this thing here, if anybody's lived in like New York City or something, on the rooftops, they have these things sticking out so you don't jump from rooftop to rooftop. That's so you didn't get on the bridge. The bridge would be right over to the left. So the photographer found this vantage point irresistible. There are over 50 images taken from on or near this spot. And a lot of them focus on the Tredegar. You're overlooking the ruins of the CS Armory. So this is where all the small arms, all the pistols, all the swords, anything explosive basically came out of here. And you can see what happened after the evacuation fire. It's gone, right? But surrounding it is the Confederate laboratory on Browns Island, which you can see on the most explosive day ever in Richmond. These wooden buildings did not burn. Now, it had exploded in 1863 due to the carelessness of one of its workers, but that day, it remained intact. And of course, in the background, not that yet. Stop. In the background is the Tredegar Ironworks, which cranked out 1,099 cannon for the Confederate Army during the Civil War. Nowhere else even came close. So, when people ask you, why? Why was Richmond chosen as the Confederate capital? That's stupid. Yeah? Where else you got that? Where else can you make 1,099 cannon? Really helps you understand if the Confederates go somewhere else or don't choose Richmond and they don't defend it, there is no war. It's that simple. Okay? I know Rhett Butler said we don't have a single cannon factory in the entire South. He's wrong. Okay? We just have to live with that. But what I love about these photographs is the detail. Because the lenses on these things were about this big, I'm serious, they were this big. They are capturing deep focus stuff in the background without even trying. Okay, you have to really try hard today, but back then it was easy. And so when you look at this, where I've got it highlighted here, you can actually see James Monroe's tomb in Hollywood Cemetery, clear as day, over a mile from the vantage point of this photograph. I'm telling you, that's what's waiting for you when you hit these things up in the Library of Congress. My all-time favorite shot around the Tredegar area, however, is this one, which is actually taken from the South Bank. And this really illustrates something that's important to understand about these photographs. We want them to be like altruistic documentarians, don't we? Just put your camera down and take a picture. In fact, that's sort of the lie we tell ourselves whenever we see a photograph, right? This is just a click. They didn't have a click. They had to set this up. So they treated it like art. And you should experience it like art. Okay? You think those people were just hanging out on the rocks, waiting for a photographer to show up so they could be photographed? Stop it. Okay? This is a posed image. They want it to be posed. You look at the light, look at the reflection, look at how it draws your eye right to it, and you can, of course, see who these people are. Less than a week before, these people were surely in slavery, and now they are free. The art, of course, is you asking that question. What is their future? What has this meant? When I say we should experience it as art, let that question ring. But again, look at all the wonderful details. Look at the basket, right? Look at the details of their dresses. Look at the boy with no shoes, who obviously the cameraman has moved into the photograph to be there with them. And in the back, of course, the Tredegar Ironworks, right? You can even see some fires already going. They're trying to get back in business, right? And the ruins of the evocative Richmond and Petersburg Railroad Bridge here. Very powerful shot. And of course, if you're like me, you're thinking, look, those rocks are pretty distinctive. I can go out there and find them. No, you can't. The Manchester Bridge goes right over the site, and clearly when they put that in, they destroyed them. I tried, folks. I tried so hard. But we just have this to remind us of what that South Bank once looked like. But where you can go to is Belle Isle, which is now a city park. And this is one of the very few, I mean less than 5, photographs that we have of Richmond during the Civil War, not after. So this is a Confederate photographer, a guy named Charles Reese. Oh, wow, excuse me. And I bet you've all been to his grave and just didn't know it. You know the dog in Hollywood Cemetery? Nobody does? Okay, if you go into Hollywood Cemetery, there's this cast iron dog. It's very, very famous, and it stands over the grave of a little girl. That's Charles Reese's daughter. There's more mythology about this thing than anything else. It's just something, a grave decoration that's taken on a life of its own. But if you look at the plot that she's in, C.R. Reese, he's the photographer. Yeah, that kind of stuff. So he plopped his camera down up on the hill at Belle Isle and overlooked the prison camp during its operation. Right? That's actually the prison commandant, right there. And you can see all the tents now filled with Union prisoners of war. Look at the cannon overlooking the camp itself and the capital of the Confederacy. All this area here. Look at these huge mills, the Gallego flour mills, two of the largest in the world before they burned in 1865. There's the Richmond and Petersburg Railroad Bridge, which we just saw the ruins of before it burned. Incredible stuff in here, right? It's all here. And unfortunately, the negatives don't survive, so we can't get any better than this print. That kind of bugs me. But because this vantage point is so evocative, the photographers in 1865 are going to come back and take the exact same shot. So keep that in your mind as we look at that. Same place, same shot, 2 years later. By this time, of course, the prison is empty. The city is burned out. Where'd those two big mills go? Right? They're gone, completely burned down by the Confederate evacuation fire. And you've still got the Confederate capital looming over it all. So the art of this, of course, why would you lug a huge and heavy camera apparatus up a 90-foot hill if not to make you ask a question? If not to make you think, you could see it. Look, got the Confederate capital, could overlook and see. No, you can't. It's just the vantage point of the, camera trickery. But it's trying to put it all in one shot, right? You've got the cannon that's going to blow away the prisoners. You've got the Capitol overlooking the camp. I mean, come on. This is absolutely loaded with, well, frankly, propagandistic messages. But, yeah, this is supposed to make you feel. It's supposed to make you think. It's not just a document. It's a physical act. So why do you do it? It's art. So is this, the prison cemetery on Belle Isle. You think a guy was just hanging out there weeping over a grave of an unknown Union soldier when the cameraman showed up? No. In fact, we know exactly who that is. It's Reeke's assistant, Gardner's assistant, John Reeke, another photographer. So this is absolutely an artistic rendering. And let's just get past these are staged photographs, these are fake. Fake. That's every photograph, folks. We got to get over this. Okay, if I take your picture right now, if I get out my camera and I say, okay, everybody, smile, what'd I just do? I faked it. You weren't smiling. I made you smile. Or I might even think, ooh, no, I don't like the horizon here. There it is, right? That's what you do. It's art. It's always been art. It's okay. That's what photography is. But of course, in the middle of all this is all kinds of great documentary stuff, like this. You can read the headboards on the graves. After the war, they were disinterred from Belle Isle and relocated to the Richmond National Cemetery, where they still rest today. So I went and found them. And you can see they're right next to each other even now. I don't know how they did that. They must have taken them in waves, sort of stick them together. But you can go and visit their graves. They've still got their names attached to them over in the Richmond National Cemetery. But for a brief moment, this was paid for, maintained, and fenced by the U.S. government as a national cemetery. So it's one of the very first and one of the very first ex-national cemeteries there ever was. Moving the camera again, and I have no idea why the cameraman moved his vantage point from right there, went across this bridge, climbed a giant hill to take this weird photograph. And I've been trying to figure this out for years. Because he climbed a hill in which there was a giant Confederate fort. In fact, if he turned the camera around, he'd be about 10 feet from a huge Confederate fort. And the painful truth is that we don't have any photographs of the forts that surrounded Richmond, the ones right around the city. And he's 10 feet from it, having climbed a hill, and only took this one shot. Why? Turn around, please, right? So what is in this that was so compelling to him that made him take this shot and take that walk? I don't know. I really don't have an answer. But trying to make lemonade out of lemons, you can see some really awesome stuff, like the cannon that we just saw in that photograph from the hill. There it is, right? That's Belle Isle. That's the prison camp area right there. You can still see some of the tents in the hospital that you could see in the other shot. But, of course, in the background is probably my favorite things, which are the Tredegar Ironworks, right? There's the Pattern Building, where we used to have a visitor center for years and years. There's the gun foundry that we saw in the other photograph. It's cranking out all those cannons. So if you go to the American Civil War Museum today, it's right down here. Second Presbyterian Church, plenty of you have been there, I'm sure, right? From the 1840s, still dominates the skyline at the time. And my all-time favorite building in downtown Richmond, Pratt's Castle, which was actually built, look at that thing. It was built by let's just go there. Look at that thing. It was built by a photographer. Yeah, he made so much money taking photographs, William Pratt, that he was able to build this thing. Now, when I build my house, I don't get turrets. And he's like, I want 6 of them. All right? I want glass enclosures. I want a secret passageway. Yes, he had one. I mean, like this is the craziest thing you can possibly dream of. And there's even a going up to this, is it like a spiral staircase? And all this is a spiral staircase that goes up to this so you could, look over your dominion. What is going on? But every photographer that came to Richmond was fascinated by this because they knew him and they were hoping to find him. He had fled, or I shouldn't say fled. He had a job at the University of Virginia. He had an equally outlandish plan for rehabbing the grounds at UVA, which the board had been kind of putting him off on. Sorry, it's the war, man. We don't have any money, and finally they just scrapped it. But it's pretty outlandish too. If you ever want to take a side detour, go look it up. But he wasn't there. But the photographers found it irresistible. So they took pictures of the outside of the house, and at least one of them, Alexander Gardner, got his photographer to carry his camera right up to there and took a panorama of the city of Richmond from the turret. Now, before we do this, I want you to think about the physicality of this because it's fascinating to me. Remember that each image that you're going to see so artfully and masterfully stitched together in Photoshop was a physical act that would require the effort of about 20 minutes. Okay, not just the exposure of the shot, but you got to develop. Let's start for how they would have done it. You would have had to prepare the plate, which meant you had a chemical bath, and it's ready to go, and you'd sort of get it there, and you'd make sure it's sticky. And this takes time, and you got about 40 seconds between that time coming out of the bath. That plate goes into the sleeve, and somebody has to run that from the darkroom wagon up those stairs. And Gardner has to have that thing, focused and ready to go so that when the guy gets up there now out of breath, hands him the thing, he puts it in, exposes the plate, closes it, gives it back to his assistant, runs back down, and he's got about 20 seconds to do this because that thing, time is ticking. He's got to get that in the bath to start developing it right away. And then he's got to start it all over again. Get another one. Get it tacky. Get it tacky, put it in the sleeve, and go. 40 seconds, right? Okay, back. And he's going to do it 5 times with the plate and 5 times with a stereo camera. If this building were still here, I would have an annual event called the Gardner Challenge in which you had to do that. So when you look at the finished result, imagine that poor guy running up and down those stairs to get you this. So as we overlook Richmond, you saw Second Presbyterian, there's the Capitol. Here's the canal coming up on the right. This is the unburnt portion of the city. This is the burned portion of the city, right? Those 2 big mills you saw in the Belle Isle shot, there they are in ruins. Coming up on the right will be the Confederate Armory, Virginia Manufactory of Arms. There's that vantage point for over 50 shots I talked about right there. And Browns Island is going to come up right here. This is the laboratory that we saw before. There are the ruins of the Richmond and Petersburg Railroad Bridge right across. And there's Manchester off in the distance. One of the very few photographs we have that shows it, because most of the photographs are focused on the ruins. So huffing and puffing to get you that panorama. The fascinating thing to me is that although I have seen one instance of Gardner's people actually stitching that together. In fact, it's at the Virginia Historical Society. I saw Charlie Bryan back here. You probably know it. It was on display for years and years. And that's the only one I've ever seen. So as far as selling these things, they flopped like a fish. Nobody bought them. They're priced incredibly high and probably priced themselves out of the market. So that's honestly why we own them now, because the photographers couldn't make any money off of them. And it's only until recently that we could really think about what these are. And I always like to salute that poor photographer's assistant who made that run to get us that. You saw the canal there briefly, but I want to focus on what I think is one of the coolest things in Richmond was the canal basin, the James River and Kanawha Canal. Most of you just know is a ditch that runs parallel to the river as you go west. Like if you go across the Huguenot Bridge, you can see it. But this is a serious operation, and its terminus had a giant lake in downtown Richmond. And I mean, really, count the blocks, right? 1 block, 2 blocks, half a block, and it was really three blocks and a half. Lake in downtown Richmond. Now, if you're a photographer, you found this irresistible. And so they start taking photographs like crazy of the canal basin. But, of course, just like the Oakwood Cemetery shot that we talked about before, you will see this captioned countless times as the James River. Obviously, anybody who's been to Richmond knows the James does not look like that at any point along its course near Richmond. Quite the opposite. It's class 4 rapids. But it just shows you how people who've never been here slap up these captions. They just get repeated so often they're true, and people actually believe it. And I get it all the time. Similarly, view of the James River, Richmond beyond, after the Yankees burned Richmond. No! The Confederates did that. The Union troops put it out the next day when they came in. But it just sounds like the Gone with the Wind narrative, doesn't it? So we've just repeated it so often it's true. Stop it. It's okay. The Confederates accidentally burned down their own capital. Whoops. They did a lot of whoops. That's what the Confederates were good at. And I say that as a Confederate historian. But within this image, of course, think about the art, the Capitol, the ruins below, symbolic as hell. They're trying to get you to feel that art. But of course, what's cool is what's in it. Baled oats and hay, wood and coal, rope, etc. You start to see the city coming alive, right? You know, this is all commerce. This is all people's businesses and houses, right? J.N. Hoflick, candy manufacturer. This guy fascinated me. I had to know, right? Because you think candy manufacturer, you know, you probably imagine all the kids coming by and he's got peppermint sticks and all this kind of stuff. You know, the candy man can, right? He's a killer. Yeah. In 1863, he shows up in the Richmond newspaper charged with killing one of his slaves. Not just killing one of his slaves, but holding her head in a bucket of water until she drowned. His defense? My wife did it. She fled. He was acquitted. But it happened there. And that's one of the few things we have to remind us of that. Not just the happy candy manufacturer, but the ugly side as well. But of course, my favorite thing is the stuff that doesn't usually make it into photographs. Things like outhouses. So when everybody gets dreamy about, oh man, the canal basin, look at this, beautiful. We should bring that back. People called it the man trap because there wasn't a rail or anything like that. So drunk guys were constantly stumbling and falling into the canal. All kinds of dead animals were floating around there. It was awful. The stench was terrible. In the summer, they had to drain it because cholera and all this kind of stuff. And you can see what was actually being put into it on a daily basis. So this was an open sewer. But it's photographically evocative, and so it gets shot all the time. And it's not a coincidence that the photographer did this where you would see the cannon that were put there by the basin bank to be transported elsewhere. This is all with a message. Could have put his camera anywhere. He put it here. But looking deep in the background, I found this. And this kind of haunts me. I got to tell you. It's just one woman standing there with a parasol, and she's standing very still. Now, she's surrounded by 3 blocks of ruins, so she wanted to go to this spot. Was this her family business? Maybe her home? My heart just reaches out to her, across the time. And I want to ask her, what happened? But just a mute witness to all of this and that stillness that makes you ask all kinds of questions. What better art could there be? So, I can't get away from this one because I love it so much. To me, this shot is everything the photographers were going for. Okay? This is the win. Why? What makes this the one that they probably thought was going to sell 1 million copies? What do you think? What's in that is going to be so awesome? Don't worry about that guy yet, huh? American flag. Now, remember what I talked about? Anything that moves, what happens to it? It blurs. So the wind was blowing so strong and so constant that it was holding the flag out. And you can imagine the photographer, as he looked up and noticed this, was probably like, quick, put that camera down, focus it, give me the plate, please don't stop blowing, oh God, and getting this guy to run up, quick, and he did exactly what you would do. But we're going to get back to that in a second. Because in this is something that is near and dear to my heart. Again, we just talked about the nature of the canal basin, but if you had any doubt about how nasty it was, that is a dead horse floating around in the canal basin. Why is that important to me? Well, consider what we're just talking about. That wind was blowing so hard and so constant to hold the flag out. So the photographer, when he got up there, did what we would do, which is he's going to take a shot, right? In fact, if I took your picture, I'd be like, okay, everybody smile, click, let me make sure I got it, and click, right? Because all kinds of things can go on in the interim. Maybe that blurred a little bit, or one of you had your eyes closed or something like that. But I got the wind working for me, so I'm going to take 2 shots, aren't I? And this took time. This took effort. So if you're just looking at that in the National Archives catalog, you might not notice the nasty dead horse. And you might not notice the difference in the flag when it moves. 2 different shots. Again, the cameraman's doing exactly what we would do. I want to make sure I get it. I'm going to take 2 shots. And you got it great once, sort of here. But note that the wind was blowing so hard and so constant, it's not just blowing the American flag. It's blowing nasty dead horse. That's some serious wind. But this gets me thinking, thanks to Nasty Dead Horse and the photographer determined to get the money shot, what can we do with this? Yeah. Something they could never have anticipated. I can run them together as a 2-frame movie. Here we go. I mean, if this doesn't do it for you, the motion from the Civil War, well, thanks for coming to my show, guys. What are we doing here? Look at that. Everything is here, right? We can blow this up. Look, door opening and closing, right? Forever. Look at the wind blowing that flag. Look at the trees moving in the breeze. Look, there's 2 flags. One over the Customs House, too. By the way, that's the what used to be the 4th Circuit Court. Some of you, I'm sure, know where that was, or is. Over here, look at the horses eating, raising and lowering their heads forever. Right? The slight difference in the basin level due to the wind is moving the Winder Hospital supply boat just slightly. Look at the trees actually moving with that wind. You can see the shadows changing ever so slightly, giving us a good sense that when the photographer put this thing down, he had to make 2 plates almost at once so that he could do what I was just talking about, get that, take one and take the other, because very little time passes between them. And just the idea now that these horses, these people, We can see them move. We can bring them back. That's pretty awesome. And the photographers, of course, continued taking photographs, panoramas of the canal basin, like this one, which I adore. This is very, very rare, very hard to find, and I think I'm the only one that has ever stitched them all together because you can actually see the entire canal basin. But, didn't I put that in there? Yeah. Check this out. So that's what's available in the National Archives. But it seems a little lopsided, right? I stitched this all together in Photoshop. I'm pretty proud of that. In fact, I am. I'm darn proud of that until a friend of mine named John Cummings, who's up in Fredericksburg, on an auction site, found this and sent it to me. He said, "Do you know anything about it?" And I instantly recognized these piles of wood here. See? There's the customs house. There's a pile of wood. Right? There's a customs house. There's a pile of wood. I realized this is the missing part over there of this panorama. And it turns out the photographer that issued this stereo view had access to the War Department negatives and had stolen this. And I will not have a 19th century thief deny me my panorama. So, for one of the first times ever, folks, there you go. That is the true A.J. Russell panorama of the Canal Basin. That's what's available. That's what we can do. That's what we should be doing. Not just taking these things at face value. There's more, right? So let's walk around a little bit before we quit. This is Capitol Square, and one of my favorite images by a guy named Hathaway, very unusual and rare photographer, but he took this incredible shot of Capitol Square from the Spotswood Hotel. I'm sure some of you know the old bell tower in Capitol Square. There's the fountain. I'm sure you visited that before. And of course, the Capitol, which now has its wings, but this shows you what it looked like in 1865. Down here are the ruins of the Confederate War Department. When you hear about the Confederate government's records all burned, that's where they were. And it is a nightmare to me every day that if it's a record from the last year of the war, it's gone. Because, same as if the Pentagon burned, all the records inside went with it. And they're just gone. There's nothing we can do about it. But believe me, if time travel is ever invented, I'm going back right there with a lot of fire extinguishers. And then I'm going to St. Louis in 1977, but that's another story. Do the same thing for World War II. Capitol building itself, kind of boilerplate stuff. You'll see this in almost every book about Richmond or photographs of the Civil War, and I'm bored with it except for the fact that we got Matthew Brady himself in the image, and that's not going to be the last time. He was obsessed with putting himself in the image and did it repeatedly, so we'll see him again. But this is another where it was taken multiple shots, and you can run them together as a movie. Look at all the people moving around. You can actually track Brady, right? He's, watch, there, and now he's there. See, there and there. Look at the shadows. Serious time elapses, right? They really want these two shots. They had no idea I'd be able to turn it into a movie, but, oh yeah, I did it anyway. So many questions with these guys. Maybe one day I'll get some answers. The governor's mansion, just down the road a little bit. Pretty standard stuff. Looks exactly the same as today, except here's our buddy hiding in the back. Here's Matthew Brady. One of my favorite shots of Capitol Square is this one, which by itself looks pretty nondescript. But when you blow it up, City Hall's in the background, the old City Hall. Check this out. What is going on here? Pantless Yankees running around Capitol Square? And I don't mean to make light of this, but the shooting date of this photograph was April 14th, 1865. Their war's over. Nothing's going to happen. We're almost done. They're just camped out. They don't care. But there's a sign there on the, I feel like I'm Rod Serling. There's a signpost up ahead. There's a sign here on the tree. And it really drove me crazy because it's just out of focus. So, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I got some adult beverages and sat down. I'm going to figure this out. And, there are only so many small words it could be. And it became very clear as I focused and refocused the image that what it said was, keep off the grass, do not sleep. Poor groundskeeper. It's the worst day of his life. It's completely swarmed by Union soldiers who it's over. And you can see it again here. Oh boy, this is the granddaddy. This is Washington's statue in Capitol Square. And of course, if you've seen the actual seal of the Confederate government, that's it. It's a guy on a horse pointing. No, it's a statue of a guy on a horse who happens to be George Washington. It's that statue. And you're looking at people just milling around on the square. And I like this one because it does sort of have that, I just put my camera down and exposed it, almost like an accident. Now, I don't really believe that. I guarantee he shouted out, everybody stand still, and exposed the plate. However, it doesn't seem very posed. And I can tell that because there's this, and then he moves the camera ever so slightly and does that. That's posed. That's set up. That is art. And if it starts to look familiar to you, look at the composition. Look at how your eyes get thrown right down here. Look at this standing, this strong central vertical. Look at this woman over here. Look at this guy on his knee, this guy on his elbow. It starts to look pretty familiar. Some of you might already be sort of conjuring that in your brain, but boy, it sure looks like this to me. They're in the same places, right? Especially this guy. Look at this. Look at this guy. Look at the strong central vertical. Look at the woman in the dress, right? Look at the guy on his knee. I mean, you're just like, look at even the trees sort of look similar. Did Surratt see that? I don't know, and I'm not going to take a position. Okay, I've had people from the Art Institute in Chicago contact me about this who were like, oh, you're onto something. I'm like, it's not my jam. I'm not into art history. What I am saying is that the same principles that made Surratt put his characters where he put them are the same that are motivating the photographer to do it here in 1865. It's art. And I'd be very remiss if I didn't include Libby Prison in our stroll about, because this is absolutely the most photographed building in Richmond, not even close. There are more photographs. They're all the same corner. Look at this. I mean, this is just a sampling. I could go on, but they're all the same shot. And it drives me crazy. Honestly, I don't want to see that corner anymore. I got hundreds. So I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to go around the back and share with you this, which was brought to you at incredible expense because the negative doesn't survive. So I had to buy it. You're welcome. And this is the backside of Libby Prison, but what it really is showing is the important sites of the Libby Prison escape, which is the largest single escape, we think, anywhere at any time. But it happened during the Civil War. 109 men tunneled out under this lot, wound up behind this building, and all of them came out that door right there. About 50% were captured, 50% made it to freedom. And you can see how that would have shaken out right here. So there's the tunnel. This is a diagram. So here's the prison. Here's this building. You can see it happening. Right there's the tunnel under this lot. There's no other reason for this photograph to exist. And I love that he accidentally captured the flag. But that's really what this is doing. It's telling a story about something you've heard about. Right? It's helping you see the actual place where it happened. That's very powerful. And that's what Gardner was up to. So around front again, there's my awful corner. I like to use this as a reminder when everybody gets dreamy about the past, and it must have been so nice, and the scent of magnolias. There weren't any magnolias around then. Look at this. What do you think those are? Yeah, they're exactly what you think they are. And that's just the way it is. But the photographer took 2 shots of this same spot. Look at the kids by the lamppost. Stand up, please. Why? Why did he do that? Maybe he was fascinated with the kids. So I'll give him his due. Let's look at the kids. Look at those kids. Wow. Clear as day. And I'm here to tell you, folks, this is a fly speck on the negative. But, nothing there to tell me anything about him. But I love what your mind does as you look at this. For me, the kid on the left, right? It just looks like that, But the guy on the right, my gosh. How did he know? It's 100 years in the future. But okay. Really, it's the same pose. Same attitude. Look at it. But that's just what you've got here in downtown Richmond. In another place that was photographed like crazy, St. John's Church, where Patrick Henry mouthed off to the king and said, "Give me liberty," or whatever he said. You know it. Or you know what they say said happened. But you can see that during the war, the steeple burned down. So it's not even an attractive building. It didn't burn down, it blew down, excuse me. But our buddy is going to make sure you know that he's there. There's Brady. And of course, this is something that people in Massachusetts knew all about, knew about the speech, knew about Patrick Henry, knew about how it all happened. So this is very important for them to finally see where this important event had happened. But because the thing is pretty boring, you got to do a little bit more. You got to make that a much more interesting shot. So what better prop than kids? Yeah. So there they all are lined up, and you can tell who took the photograph. There's Brady's negative box. Wouldn't I like to get my fingers in there? But, whoa, hey, how you doing? What'd I do? Oh, there we go. But my all-time favorite thing in here, of course, is not just that you can match this up like crazy, by the way. All those headstones are still there along 24th Street. But look at these kids. Just, we all do it. I've got teenagers now, so, the kids these days. Look at them. Not one of them is holding still. And you can see what the photographer was trying to do. Hey, kids, lean up against the brick wall so you'll stand still. Did it work? It's terrible, right? Nobody. Look, this kid here has two faces. He's moving, like he's blurry. Like it's a horror show. Nobody will sit still. So, they're just as hyperactive then as they are now. But who doesn't know a kid just like this? Like, here this buddy's back up against the wall, and he's 3 feet out in front. Right? Nothing different. And why am I so obsessed with this? Because it does tell a story. It tells a very fascinating story. They took 2 shots. Did you see it? Look at that. Look at this. Who'd they add? Look at that guy. Probably a former slave there on the left. Somebody's very well dressed, probably butler up there on Church Hill with a young girl. Please, a little closer, sir, a little closer, sir. And we got the shot. This time, a lot more of them stood still. But of course, you know what I'm going to do next. Oh, yeah. Come on, I got to. Motion. Oh, well, let's blow them up. Sure. Let's do that too. Look at this. Look at all the wonderful little differences. Why was this moved? They were that committed to the negative sleeve and a chemical bottle as a prop. I don't know. Look at the horse pulled the wagon slightly forward, off its chock a little bit. Look at the photographer's assistant, almost photobombing. Are you done yet? Because I got work to do. There's the actual black darkroom hood that he's going to use to develop these shots. And of course, look at all the differences. This kid out front, out back, he's gotten chastened. Look at this. Boom, boom. And take your hat off, Calm down, get up, get back. There you go. Isn't that just wonderful? Note the shoes. Look how few shoes there are. Really tells a story. All right. Go to the White House, and then we'll do a Lee House, and then we'll quit. So this is the White House of the Confederacy. You've all been there. I hope you have. And if you haven't, it's time. It's awesome. Now under new management, you might say. Of course, the federal authorities have used this, are taking this over. They're going to use it as their headquarters for the next 5 years. So it's actually the headquarters for the U.S. Army much longer than it was the White House of the Confederacy. It has an important post-war story as well, which we completely ignore. But, of course, because it's the White House of the Confederacy, we pay more attention to that. But, of course, here's our buddy again. He cannot hide from me, pal. Matthew Brady. But these I love. Behind the White House, and by the way, they used these photographs to recreate the curtains in the White House of the Confederacy. Nobody knew what they looked like. But thanks to this, we do. This is Edward Otho Cresap Ord. I just love saying his name. Edward Otho Cresap Ord and his wife and daughter posing by the table upon which the surrender was signed from Appomattox. Yeah, it's a photo prop now. And you can go and see it. It's at the Chicago, it's the Chicago History Museum now. It used to be the Chicago Historical Society, Chicago History Museum. But look at the pose. Look how he's solved the child problem. Remember the kids that wouldn't sit still? She is locked in between the table, mom's leg, and dad has got his hand out. She is not going anywhere, right? And you can see how they solved the problem again in this shot. right? Put your head on Daddy's shoulder, right? I love that Mrs. Ord is really committed to cardiovascular health. Look at the pulse taking she's doing. I have no idea what that pose is about, none at all. But you can definitely get a sense now, that bouquet, which wasn't there before, is now here. They're locked in with the girl. I mean, she's doubly locked in. Head on the shoulders, hand on the wrist. Mom's leg is holding her in. We're good. Interestingly, during the time that Ord was at the White House, she got pregnant, and her son will go on to receive the Medal of Honor for actions at what we call San Juan Hill in the Spanish-American War. And Ord was on his way to retrieve the body and bring it home when he died. And I did the math, and although you cannot be sure, it does appear that the conception date indicates his time in the White House. This, though, I adore because it's a classic get the staff together shot, and we're going to have Ord there with his staff. All these guys are in charge of Richmond now. But look at the difference because they took two shots. There's one, and there's the other. So we run them together, and why? By the way, who does this? Who does this? Remember when MacArthur got in big trouble because he posed that way with Hirohito, and everybody said, that's totally disrespectful. Gentlemen didn't put their hands in their pockets, so that's deliberate. I don't understand what that's about. But when you run it together, check out the wonderful differences, right? Look at this guy, totally committed to his pose, right? Look at his foot. Never moves. But what does? Tucked, untucked, tucked, untucked, tucked. What is going on? He actually untucked his pants in the interim. Why? Right? Look at the hats coming on, coming off, moving around. This is all important. Look at the photo bomber right up here, right? All these wonderful little details. There's even a kid. Look, right there. Look. Boom. Right, it's not a ghost. It's a kid. Everybody wants there to be ghosts. They're not. They're people. But wonderful little details here. Strolling around. You've all seen them before. Oh, I included this. I forgot that I did. This really depressed me because it came up on an auction site and then vanished. But I was able to date this image to a very specific time. This is downtown Richmond and one of the very, very pre-war photographs. Very pre-war photographs. And I was able to look and see all the various details because I'm absolutely obsessed. And I was able to determine that this dates sometime between 1849 and 1853, making this absolutely the earliest outdoor photograph of Richmond. And boy, was I crazy about this. And somebody bought it at an auction. They wouldn't tell me who bought it. I was just absolutely despondent. I figured I'd never see it again. And I mean it, folks. Joy. Like you've never. I actually fell on my knees last year in the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. They had this incredible photographic exhibit. And in the very first case that I looked in, they'd bought it. It was them. And I'm in contact right now because they don't know that I was able to date it differently than they had based on what's in the image. So we're going to be working on that. But it survived. It's ours. You own it. And I'm going to get a high res. So the next time I give this show, we're going to play with that one. But for now, it's safe. Okay? And I'm so happy to report that. Downtown, it looks like the B-17s just passed over. This is the same area we just saw, only from the other side of the street. And it gives you an idea of the destruction. This is the same site today. Here you've got the most famous photograph of Richmond, and I hate it. I don't want to spend any more time talking about it, except to note that the date that it was taken was April 8th, 1865, but you will see it captioned all the time as ladies in mourning for the death of the Confederacy. Folks, it's not dead yet. Lee's army's still in the field. They just happen to be wearing dark dresses. But thanks to that description, I can put it right where it belongs, 14th and Main, and that's the site today. So that gives you an idea about what's possible as we go through downtown Richmond. And I'd like to end, let me go real quick. I've got so much in here, I don't want to take up more of your time. But I do want to show this before we end, because it's one that's become so iconic, it's annoying. This is the Lee House on Franklin Street, and some of you have been there, no doubt. But we know the photographs that were taken behind the house. And this is Lee and his staff just sitting there. Now, do you think they were just hanging out in uniform when Brady showed up? Oh, no. They got back in uniform to get these shots, right? As far as Lee's concerned, his Army career is over, man. He was in civilian attire. but he wants to send a message. So we talked about the art before, but look at it coming full flower. Now Lee himself is participating in it to send you a message that it's over. If Brady can shoot my photograph behind my house in Richmond, come on, guys, stop it. It's over. And so he took a lot of shots, but I love that little accidents happened, like this. Do not ever wear white socks with black shoes. You know that. And there's a good reason for it. And so in this regard, Lee is a fashion crime. But you can see over here, probably because of that, the photographer scratched, don't use. Look at the collaboration. I need this better. Let's do it better. So stand up, sir. Yeah. And this photograph, of course, has gone around the world, but I bet you never knew that he did it twice. And you can see the artistic hand at work as he's, I tell you what, you know what? Step just a hair. Boom. Why? Because now his head shows up right in the cross. You can see the artistic hand at work. And even within this, wonderful little accidents, like the graffiti on the side of the wall that says devil. Believe me, there were a lot of people that felt that way. And I'm sure the photographer saw it, but nobody wanted to pass it. I'm sure Lee knew it was there, but he's probably just like, the message of this photograph is I'm done. That's part of it. Leave it. And it's been there ever since. So that is what I want you to remember. Sometimes it's not just the image, it's what's in it. And I invite you all, Library of Congress, Prints and Photographs, National Archives, and other repositories, go further. I want to see your show. Thank you so much. Do we have time?
We may be able to take one or two questions and comments.
I apologize for running long. I tend to do that. But if anybody has any questions, let's do it.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead. Excellent question. Okay. Some of these were taken in plate, which means an 8x10, I'm serious, an 8x10 glass plate, and the lens was even bigger. So that required a separate camera, but most of them were taken in stereo, which is one negative, but two lenses on a negative about like this, okay? So most of these guys are carrying around both in a wagon. So anytime you see the photograph, they were not lugging them around. A wagon had to be able to get there, and it had to be somewhere near a road. By the way, that's very important if you're ever trying to geolocate an image, is you got to consider the wagon had to be able to get there, so it's probably near a road. Like that shot that I said, I don't know why it was taken, the Belle Isle shot. I don't know how he got there. I don't even know how physically he got up that hill, except to really put the spurs to those horses, which makes that photograph just very much more mysterious. But each one of those weighs about 80 pounds total to actually transport it and plop it down. So you're usually going to put it down and leave it.
Thank you, Mike.
You bet. Thank you. I'll hang around a bit if anybody's got any other questions or wants to talk. Thank you for coming to my show.
Thank you, Mike.
You bet.